welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire. Welcome again to our weekly Wednesday noon Lead Live broadcast. Today, our subject is Black is the Blueprint for Everything. Reflects our guest understandings about the rich cultural traditions of Blacks that are foundational to the development and ongoing advancement of these United States of America. What is a blueprint? Well, we know it historically really derived from architecture, a set of design plans or other technical drawings that informs the details of actions to be taken to construct within an industry. But we also know it as business processes and systems requirements, detailed descriptions of those things, or IT blueprint as a planning tool or document that an information technology organization creates in order to guide its priorities, projects, budgets. I can go on. But we understand also that cultural groups, and Blacks in particular, with the legacy of the cultural understandings and expertise from the continent of Africa, have brought strength to create a blueprint that has led to major efforts within this country. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And I want to highlight an example of Black strength as a blueprint to economic recovery. Just think about it. We'll talk about it later. Think about the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the early 1900s, typically called Black Wall Street. I remember one of my professors years ago, who's a legacy from that genius of development among Blacks who were otherwise cut out from the economy. They chose to build what they had, and they built a remarkable community. Regrettably, a massacre, major bombing destroyed that environment, but not before lessons were learned. It's a blueprint to economic recovery. Well, we have an artistic activist today, and she reminds us that artistic activism is valuable to revealing how Black culture is a blueprint to everything. American culture is so diverse, yet also stems from Black creators throughout history, including agriculture. Think about Frederick McKinley Jones. Do you know that he created the transportation refrigeration system? Think about cuisine, music, dance, physical infrastructures, and even nursery rhymes. Ask about that. Well, Briena Brown, an artist activist, will discuss this and give us insight on how art blurs the lines of difference and encourages us to connect in a different way than other forms of activism. She will also address the way art has created an intersection of thought across ethnic groups and how our society could connect at a deeper level if we only treated every individual the way we treat art, with a desire to understand. As a graduate student leader, Briena was also part of the team that produced the Silicon Valley Pain Index, where 0 Black females were found in 10 large Silicon Valley tech companies. In 2020, we want to hear your experience and imaginings about how those and other firms could remedy this effectively and in a way to sustain diversity within these and other organizations. We know there's a high correlation between equity and institutional excellence, and not only in terms of achieving some of the mission-driven outcomes desired, but for those revenue-reliant organization, increasing the revenue remarkably. So there's so much I want to share, but more importantly, I want to introduce you to our guests. This woman is remarkable. So I'm going to ask Briena to come on board now, introduce herself. Hello, Briena. Good to see you today.
Hello, good to see you too.
Well, Briena is a graduate student at San Jose State University. She's also much more than that. So I'd like for you to share a little bit about yourself, Briena, as we introduce these two major related topics today.
Yeah, so my name is Briena Brown. I am a San Jose State student. I'm about to be a senior. I am currently a sociology major, but I'm about to receive a studio art minor. So yeah, I've been really involved with SJSU's activism, more so towards student homelessness. But I've been recently involved in a little bit more just with everything going on. So yeah, I'm really excited to share my passion with not only sociology, but with art, and just to give all of you my personal interpretation of it.
Excellent. So I want to begin with the first question, and I want the audience, as you're coming on board and you're hearing, if you have any questions, please just put them in the comment section live so we can capture them and bring you into the conversation directly. And for the rest of you who don't have a question necessarily or a comment, please just be reflecting on this and sharing it with individuals you know. We're hoping to do much more than just inspire you today. We have a compelling set of topics, and we know that you can add to that rich discussion. So even if you're just thinking about it, be ready to pay it forward. So how does the phrase "Black is the blueprint for everything," I mean, what does it mean to you, Briena?
Whew, okay, well, so this phrase means exactly that. I think that Black culture is embedded throughout American culture. I don't think that I know that. Black individuals have influenced society in ways that are often overlooked. I actually just painted a mural in downtown Palo Alto recently. My first piece in the series called Black is the Blueprint that kind of emphasized this concept. I painted 3 Greek muses as Black women. So the 3 muses that I painted were Clio, who is the goddess of history, Euterpe, which is the goddess of music, Erato, goddess of love poetry, which also translates to desired in Greek. I wanted to fuse my Greek and Black roots together to kind of emphasize this phrase that we've been discussing. So yeah, I guess I'll just explain each muse and explain my thoughts behind doing
Please
each one.
do. Please
Yeah.
do.
Cool. So the first one I painted was Clio, who is the goddess of history. I painted her because Black women often don't get enough credit for their role in history. An example of this could be Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vangan. I don't know if the audience might have seen the movie Hidden Figures, but these 3 Black women were very, very key components of getting American astronauts to space through NASA. That's kind of behind that. And then Euterpe, that's the second one I painted, goddess of music. A lot of people don't realize this, but all music genres are derived from African drum beats. Black women are constantly reshaping different genres of music, even now, with little to no recognition as well. And although music has evolved over time into multiple genres, there would be no American music without African influence, and that's something that should be acknowledged. The third muse I painted was Erato, who is the goddess of love poetry, also translates to desired, like I mentioned. So Black women are the blueprint to what the word desire means here in America. Black women naturally have tan skin, full lips, and braids, whatever that may be. And those are all features that races of, across the world try to adopt as an ideal form of beauty. And it's not uncommon that Black women are ridiculed for these things at a really young age. So hypothetically, this concept makes Black women one of the most desired intersectional identities in history, although they're often, the most overlooked and mistreated. So from all of this, this entire concept, I want to continue to highlight the overlooked role of Black culture in our daily lives in the future through this series. And although I only focused on 3 muses, all forms of artistic creative expression can be traced back to African culture, like I mentioned. This makes a lot of sense to me personally because when African Americans were brought into slavery to build this country from the ground up, they brought their culture with them and embedded it into American culture. And, it's really important to recognize that Black culture is so deeply embedded in American culture that it can often go unrecognized in our daily lives. And that's kind of, why I think that art can blur the lines of differences in this way. But it can also provide a productive space of learning across cultures, classes, or beliefs. So it's kind of my take on that phrase.
So you said a productive space of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that? Go a little bit deeper. What do you mean by productive space of learning?
Yeah, so when someone looks at art, they often just try to understand. That's their initial reaction. There's no other thoughts other than the concept of understanding. So it provides a empty space, a space where any thought can thrive, any thought can excel into something amazing. And it's not being taken away by any physical things, any beliefs, religions. It's just purely understanding expression.
So you're indicating that in the space of art, and I know we talked about it before, people tend to be open to all the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
They're not, it's almost as though their predispositions, their biases, their set of values, et cetera, are almost set aside a little bit, if not completely. And they're looking to understand and go deep. Well, why do you think there's not a wiring to do that with darker hue people who are dark, whether they're Black, whether they're Native American, whether they're dark Indians, whether they're dark Latinos? Why do you think there's a wiring to consider Black folks other, or to consider other people who are of darker hue other, and not see the essence or take the time to learn the essence of who they are as human beings?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of predetermined bias. Racism is not something you're born with. I think it's definitely taught through time, and it's based off of who you were raised around, how you were raised. I think that plays a really big part in the way people interpret art. If it kind of embodies a certain race or a certain genre, but I think art can blur those lines of differences. Like I was mentioning, I think that art is a factor that we overlook oftentimes because we don't realize the power in it, the power to connect.
You shared something with me when we talked recently. You were talking about your father and how when you were being reared, he was careful to remind you of your Blackness. Can you speak to that and the power of that in your own development? And I want to come back to this question of why, and you don't have to have a perfect answer, and maybe the audience has some input in this regards. Why is it that in this culture, and not only in the United States, but in other places of the world, especially in this hemisphere, there is this predisposition not to value anything that is dark when it comes to the human being, but to value what they have to offer and own it, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it is architecture, whether it is food, etc. So tell us a little bit about what your father did to impress upon you the importance and the value of your Blackness.
Yeah, so this is a concept that we talk about in sociology, just the influence of history. There's a lot of really deeply rooted concepts and ideas that have just been passed down over time, and we haven't really done much about it. So for me, and me kind of accepting and learning my Blackness from a really young age, my father taught me what it meant to be Black. He made me watch Roots, he made me watch Friday, he made me watch all of these components of what Black culture meant, because although I'm not fully Black, it's still something that is just so deeply embedded in American culture, just the importance of race, that it's something that all Black people, regardless if you're a quarter, half, or full, all Black people have to know about, so that they're not going into the world blind.
You said something that I think is always curious. You said, although I'm not fully Black. And I think that is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's honoring your mother, who we call white. She's a Greek ancestry, right?
Yeah, so my father is Black and Greek, and my mother is white and Mexican.
Okay, white and Mexican. Beautiful, diverse.
Thank
And
you.
so it's honoring your mixed cultural heritage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the reality for the vast majority of Blacks, based upon it's old data that I've looked at. I have not looked at it recently, so my apologies in advance to the audience. Most of us are of diverse background, and we can trace it now through some of the tests that are being done, not completely, because the test is only on one side of the family. And so it always causes me to ask the question, what is Blackness? You know, I am definitely Black. You're definitely Black. So I'm totally Black. And yet I honor the fact that I have Native American, I have East Indian, I have French, I have Spanish, and I'm sure I have stuff I don't know, in addition to having that rich cultural background and that ancestral lineage to Africa. And what's interesting is that anthropologists say that where is the birth of humans? In the continent of Africa. So we all have our lineage traced back there, at least based upon the known science. And of course, science, as we get more information, we get more learning. But right now we understand that all of us come from that part of the planet. So I just think it's very powerful to talk about Blackness and in a way that is freeing, in a way that is elevating, is in a way that is honoring. And so from your artistic perspective, why have you chosen to do that? Because even though some people's parents tell them to honor their who they are, they still walk around in shame. What is it about you that led you to receive that and honor it, and then want to share it on a scale that goes just beyond your household, your school, your local community?
Yeah, so for me, I was raised in a predominantly white community. So with that being said, by me kind of diving into my Black culture through art was the first time in my life that I was allowed to freely express my identity. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's definitely a culture shock to be like mixed in certain communities. So I really appreciated arts as a way to express the way I felt and how I felt inside. Because although maybe some people don't even really know that I'm Black. They do most of the time, but I've gotten it a couple times. It allows me to express the Blackness that I feel inside, that my father taught me growing up. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you another question. Sure. I think you began to talk about it a little bit. How does art blur the lines of individual difference? And I want to make it very clear to the audience. We're not interested in negating differences. We love to illuminate differences, because it's in that difference that we find our genius as a species, in our capacity to create, to transform, to be extraordinary in our leadership locally and globally. So I want to make that very clear. And yet this question is so important. Art blur the lines of individual differences. Why is that a statement of significance to you? And how does art do that? Briena.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that most of the things we do on a daily basis can be considered art. So picking out your clothes in the morning, that's a form of fashion. Cooking and working out all require creative expression in a certain way, just like many things we do. So art allows us to step into a space of productive thought, like I said, with a desire to learn. And I would actually like to share 2 examples of this concept to hopefully help the audience understand what a space of productive thought might look like, kind of what we were mentioning before. So the first one is sports. Now, when we think of art, sports is probably not the first thing that comes to mind, but this is most definitely considered another form of art.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, and when watching sports, I would say that most individuals don't root for a team or a player because of who they are as people. Most people bet on players that are gifted in their craft. It seems realistic to me that the most racist individual in America or in the world could adore a Black team member who is a star in their favorite sport or on their favorite team. Mm-hmm. So this is just one example of what blurring the lines of difference means, but there are many more ways that art can do that. One that I hold very close to my heart is another example, which is music. Sometimes we forget that music is a form of poetry and storytelling, which is all also derived from African roots as well. So I actually would like to share 2 poems by the same artist that stood out to me personally.
Please.
Great. So the first one is, can you see the pride in the panther as she nurtures her young all alone? The seed must grow regardless of the fact that it is planted in stone. Can you see the pride in the panthers as they unify as one? The flowers bloom with brilliance and outshine the rays of sun. That was the first one. Here's the second one. When I was low, you were there for me and never left me alone because you cared for me. And I could see you coming home after work late. You're in the kitchen trying to fix us a hot plate. You're just working with the scraps you were given, and Mama made miracles every Thanksgiving. So when I was reading that, I'm almost positive that most of those watching were not thinking about what race the poet was or where this poet lived. Most of you were just listening and trying to understand the author's message. Now, for those of you who were thinking of race, my intuition tells me that you weren't thinking the author was someone like Tupac Shakur. Maybe some of you recognize that one, but for those of you who don't know, both of those poems were written by Tupac.
And so, who's Tupac, for those who don't know?
Yes, for those who don't know, might have caught it there at the end, but yeah, we tend to forget that rap is poetry, rap is storytelling, and rap is most importantly art. So yeah, I just wanted to recite this for all of you today and explain how art can open our hearts and minds to things that we may not be interested in otherwise.
It's interesting, as you were talking about sports, and then of course you led into the poetry, made me think about artists who just literally, it's like they glide in and out of diverse communities with ease, and people don't see them as fill in the blank, tall, short, big, small, skinny, Black, Latino, Native American, white, Asian, Pacific Islander. They don't see these differences, whether they're native or non-native born. What they see is what they enjoy, what they want, that edifies them in terms of the art. And that a lot of these folks end up serving as ambassadors, some of them unintentionally, and some of them make it plain they don't consider themselves to be role models, and yet they are ambassadors to help blur those lines of, as you call it, differences, but more powerfully to help people understand that what they're experiencing is another human being.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, we're almost we are 99.9% identical biologically. I don't know if most people know that. Biologically, humans across the board are 99.9% identical. That small difference biologically is what makes you, me.
Exactly.
And so I just think it's fascinating when we allow ourselves to study, to understand science. We allow ourselves, as you have done it, as we allow ourselves to study to understand art, as you have done, and then you're living it through your own expression. As we allow ourselves to go deep and learn and be open to learning more, all of a sudden the vista is ours. It's no longer a concern of, oh my goodness, the other person, I'm afraid if they're in my space, they're going to take what I have, and therefore I must fight by fight. Well, that's based upon what? Assumption that life itself is limited, that there's limited resources. And when we believe in finite resources, then we are concerned about the other having, because that suggests I won't ever have. But when we understand that there's enough, not just metaphorically speaking, literally, there's enough for everyone. If we transform the nature of our society so that there's a basic set of resources for everyone to address those basic needs. And then as we aspire to more, open up the vistas so we can aspire to more. And that's part of the essence of what I sense from you when I talk with you initially. And so that the audience know, when I spoke with Briena, we're looking forward to bringing her professor and her on to talk about this study and the study of Silicon Valley Pain Index, where the San Jose State University Human Rights Institute and Briena, as a member of the team designing infographics, they learned that only zero Black female employees were at 10 large Silicon Valley companies. Can you believe that in this day, 2020? And so we want to know what that means to you. I want to start with Briena as I pull up this actual study, and then Raleigh and Jeff behind the scenes are going to share with us the link in the live comments. But look at this. Can you imagine in 2020, what this pain index does is reveal the real income and wealth inequality in Santa Clara County. But let me tell you something. I have no doubt that if we take comparable process and data across the United States, we'll find the same kind of pain index all over the place. And it will depend upon the groups that are there, will find disparities. And my question is why? And it's not a question that, I don't mean it to be a rhetorical question. It is right now because this is a broadcast. I want us to ask why, and ask how we can be the solutions to address this. But they indicate white supremacy and income wealth inequality in Santa Clara County. That's painful to hear. This was revealed in the LA Times, in online media. It really took off. So I want to ask that question of you, Briena. What does this mean to you? And from your perspective, as someone who spent a short stint in tech-related industry, to have 0 Black women employed by 10 large Silicon Valley firms.
Yeah, so the SJSU Human Rights Institute found the research, like you mentioned. I've been involved as a member of their design team for the past month or so. This index stood out to me because I personally can relate to a couple statistics on there. The most important one to me being that, the one you mentioned, there are 10 large Silicon Valley tech companies with 0 Black female employees. I say this because I was the only Black woman working at a company in the Silicon Valley. And I didn't realize how much bigger this issue was than just my experience. So I'm thankful for this index and the way that it has validated my reality on this. And I really recommend everyone, who's watching, or just even anyone who's not, just to check this index out. If you're interested in learning more, it's right there, it's on the screen. But it basically highlights the inequality that prevails in California's Silicon Valley. And it just shows us which direction we need to start going in. I think a lot of times we don't focus on this side of the communities. And this is the most important part of the community to focus on, because this is the community that needs the attention.
And what I value is that it didn't just focus on who's employed there. It focused on the level of housing and the housing insecure. It focused on the level of poverty, and which always strikes me. In this country, no one should be poor, independent of their ethnic identity, their age, their location. No one should be poor. And so the question is how to transform the nature of everything that we're doing so we don't have these kinds of disparities. That's a whole nother question. And I'm sure it's a show that's upcoming. In fact, a number of my upcoming guests will talk about some of these disparities in more detail, but from a standpoint of how to lead us out of this. Because this show is about leadership, excellence, and achievement on demand. And quite frankly, there's brilliant people throughout Silicon Valley, and these stats do not have to be the case in Santa Clara County in particular. So I have another question, And it's a question to us, Briena, not just to you. It's to you and I, as well as those who are viewing. And that question is, are there things that we can imagine those tech firms and other firms could do to make a difference? So when the index is done next year, we won't find a lot of this results. And given the trillions of dollars in that area, we won't find it at the level of homelessness. And I know that's a personal passion of yours beyond just the representation of Blacks in tech firms and Black females in particular, because you are the president of the Homeless Alliance at San Jose State University, correct?
Yes.
So before we talk a little bit about that, tell us what your thoughts are about how those firms can address this, and literally in just months, not years, but in months.
Yeah, so in a matter of months, I mean, there are many things that need to be done. There are so many problems. It's a very complex topic to address every single thing on that index. But on terms of what tech companies can do better right now, there needs to be more Black people hired in the tech industry, period. You know, when I say Black people, I'm not talking about only people who look like me. Many companies here hire individuals with lighter skin tones, such as myself, because it's more palatable to them. But this should also be acknowledged when talking about increasing Black representation. We cannot discuss Black representation without acknowledging colorism. There needs to be more representation of Black individuals with darker skin tones, not only in the office, but in executive positions as well. A way that this could be done is to start youth internship programs specifically to give more opportunities to the Black and Brown youth. So leaning into Black and Brown communities with significantly less opportunities could be a first step. I personally think that Twitter has programs that could be a good model for this. They've implemented diversity programs that are specific to providing young Black and Brown college students internship opportunities. Of course, there's more that goes into making these types of programs successful, but there needs to be a way that companies can equal the playing field of opportunity. Another thing that could possibly be done is taking responsibility for the lack of diversity in the office. You know, creating that dialogue. That dialogue needs to be had. And if a company can only count the amount of Black people on one hand or even two hands, that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed internally. Being transparent about diversity reports and actively seeking Black and Brown representation is crucial for tech companies now more than ever. And of course, there's a lot more that needs to be done past that to address all the other things on that Silicon Valley Pain Index. But this could be just a good step in the right direction, just with everything going on right now.
You just mentioned something. Definitely, I agree with you. Investing in youth now to prepare them, to inspire them. And quite frankly, so many youth have the talent to run circles in the tech industry. And the Kapoor Center here in Oakland is a great example of investing in Black and Brown communities. And when we say Black, we're talking about Black folks. When we say Brown, we're talking about Latinos. We're talking about, and that includes the whole range of Latinos, which very diverse. We're talking about Native Americans. We're talking about Asians. We're talking about folks who are underrepresented, especially Pacific Islanders. So when I think about a center like the Kapoor Center, they are investing, they're putting their own dollars in the community. And they're teaching people coding and other kinds of competencies so that they're ready to move into these roles. So to say that there's no fill in the blank is questionable, especially considering there's so many networks. So just going to the organization, folks within the organization, as you recommended, and having those conversations may also tap into networks that these individuals are part of, men and women, where there are Black women, where there are more Black men, where there are Latino men, where there are Asian executives who could take on executive roles. Because Asians, while they're better represented within the tech firms, they're underrepresented in terms of executive roles. So we can go on and on. So I think that's powerful. I want to honor something. You had something else you wanted to talk about or speak to in terms of lines blurred. Give us that other example.
Yeah, so this also ties into what we were just discussing in a way. So kind of going back to the concept of art, and even the way art can fall into what we were just discussing. Art blurs the line of individual difference in the same way that a tree sprouts. The different branches of the tree represent us as individuals, different experiences, beliefs, ethnicities, whatever. And the base of the tree represents our biological connection as human beings, since we all come from the same ancestors, like you said. And then there's the roots. So the roots of that tree represent art, different expressions of creativity that keep us grounded and connect us in a way that can't be seen. So with that, it blurs the line of judgment, and we need to start treating each other the way we treat art, with the desire to understand another's perspective. And, this concept could even help tech industries just move forward as well. If we treat all people like art, that's just super important right now. And our country could be so much more advanced, and our valley could be so much more advanced if we lean into underprivileged communities with that same desire to understand. I've personally done multiple videos of Black and Brown individuals living in poverty with incredible talents and extremely smart, but no opportunity. And art has no boundaries of race. Therefore, we need to be giving more opportunities to Black and Brown to Black and Brown individuals so that they may experience multiple forms of art and explore their own potential. Because, who knows? Maybe there's an underprivileged Black or Brown person destined to create a cure for cancer, for example, sitting on the curb right now, stuck in a city with little to no opportunity or resources to accomplish this discovery due to systemic oppression. And I know there's a lot of dialogue right now among the older generations, or maybe even just the middle generations, that no, they don't care to learn about systemic oppression based off of their age or their life experience. But my personal take on that is that humans can never stop learning. It's not a ridiculous idea to say that we may even learn something new on our deathbeds. So I don't believe that we ever stop developing in life. Maybe biologically we do, but there will always be opportunity to liberate our minds and develop our thoughts further, especially with, where we're at right now with unlimited amounts of internet resources that can provide perspective as well. So just kind of, that's a thought that I think everyone should be thinking when considering how we get this done.
You've reminded me of so many things. A statement by Dr. King that I'm going to corrupt a little bit about. Many of us actually die young, and then our bodies are still here into 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we die because we stop growing. And fundamentally, I believe that the essence of being human is about growth, however it manifests, whether it's intellectual, it's heartfelt, emotional growth, it's beyond physical growth, it's contribution. So that's powerful. Marilyn Whalen joins us, and with a comment, she said she would love to see, or like to see, the image of the Three Muses mural in Palo Alto. Do you have those where you can just upload them online? If you don't, we can make certain to post them when we conclude the show. That if you have one, at least, that would be great. And I know you sent them to me, and I wish I had them prepared to show to people.
Let's see, I'm not sure if I can add it on here, but I can give you my Instagram. My Instagram is at.
Can you put it in the live comment? Just add it.
Let me figure out how to do that.
Okay.
I know I can't.
Email it to me, and then I will send it to our team, and then they will post it in the live comments. Thank you, Marilyn. So there's something else about your statement that I want to come back to.
Sure.
And oh goodness, I don't remember it. Maybe it'll come to me. Hopefully it'll come to me before we wrap this up. I'd like for you to speak to your leadership that is significant as the president of the Homeless Alliance at San Jose State University. Why are you doing that?
So my interest originally sprouted from not my personal experience, but my father's. So my father went to San Jose State also, and he was a homeless student. So, I heard about all of his experiences, and he would tell me what it was like to be sleeping in his car and how difficult that was for him.
Mm-hmm.
And, as soon as I heard that, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the beginning. But as soon as I heard there was a Student Homeless Alliance, I knew I had to get involved, because there's no way I would ever want to see anyone, not just my peers, but just any student, anybody ever have to experience what my father experienced. So, yeah, and my father and I are really close. So, I stand with him, and I stand with all homeless students.
Well, there's an incredible level and growth of individuals across this country who are homeless. And we know beyond the United States, in many other countries, there's a constant of homelessness. And it's humbling, it's unacceptable. And I make it a point every week not to go without driving past a homeless location as a reminder to myself that I have more to do, because and my expectation is that we will solve the problem within my lifetime, if I'm so lucky. I don't know if I'm going to be here more than a month or more than a year. We just don't know, especially with the coronavirus 2019 pandemic. And yet, assuming that each one of us takes responsibility in our own ways, no heavy lifting that harms us, but in our own ways, we can change this situation overnight. I have no doubt. And some countries have done it. It's about deciding and committing. I'll leave it at that. Let me ask you, do you have any other comments or questions you'd like to pose anyone who's reviewing?
I remember we had a really interesting conversation prior about what race is.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that it? That was it, huh?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you and I talked about race, I made it very clear that when I hear the word race used a great deal, it gets under my skin. It's my stuff. It's no one else's stuff. Not your stuff unless you make it your stuff. And the reason why is because race, as those of us who've read, who understand, who've looked at science, etc., we know race is simple as a human construct. And the question is, why was race as a construct developed? Well, in this hemisphere, at least, and that's the only history I know about currently, and if there's more, please suggest where else we may check, that it was created purposely to divide, to subjugate, to dismiss a whole class of individuals, and not classes of individuals, to be subservient, to be slaves. And then whether it was Native Americans, let's see if we can get rid of all of them, unfortunately, or whether it was Africans from the continent of Africa who were considered to be better slaves than those who were from Europe, or even the remaining natives. There was this sense of we can't have them experience their humanity. So it was contrived race. Race is not a long-standing construct within the human experience. And we don't even know how long that is, but we know that it's thousands of years. So why do we use race? Yes, it helps us understand racism. And so we can put a term to it and everyone gets an understanding of that. But how can we move beyond the inherent divisive nature of the word race? Because it really has no biological basis. I don't care how many folks who really wanted to have that could not find it. So that's an open question. What are your thoughts, Briena?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sociology major, so I've taken whole classes on this concept. And personally, just from what I've learned, you're right. Race is a product of social construction. Race is not real. Different cultures, different beliefs, different religions are very real, and racism is very real. Mm-hmm. But race refers to physical characteristics such as bone structure, skin, hair, and even eye color. So race is purely based on physical assumptions from other individuals and has nothing to do with who we are as people. So it's good to be, it's important to be conscious of that, especially with the way that society is progressing and moving forward right now. And I agree with everything you said. I think it's important to address that and for people to do their own research on what that means and how to use it in their daily life if they need to, which honestly probably isn't necessary. But yeah.
I want people to know why I asked you to join the show. Because many of the individuals who come on the show and we'll have on the show have a legacy, whether it's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or 50 years of actually leading in different spaces, whether CEO, medical doctor, lawyers, educators, elders in communities, etc. You are in your 20s, correct?
Yeah, I'm 21.
And you've experienced, like a lot of young people, and some of us who are much older, I'm in my early 60s, experienced it when we were your age, which is elders, older folks saying, oh, you don't know yet, wait until you learn enough and then begin to speak. Well, my position on that has always been that's another form of an ism, and I call it ageism. It's part of this predisposition that somehow we come to age at some point that is defined by culture. And yet I have brilliance that I've experienced among folks who are not even 10, who are in their teens, who are in their early 20s, let alone 30s. So I wanted you on the show because I want to remind all of us that we need to listen to Briena. We need to listen to all the diverse Brienas across the globe. We need to pay attention and listen for understanding, not seek to be understood initially. Listen to understand and listen to the intent beyond the words, because our words are how we receive the world is based upon our pre-colored lenses. I see you first before I see myself. And the degree to which I humble myself and recognize that, I can put me to the side and I can see you. And that's what this is about. This show is about leadership at all levels. And Briena is demonstrating leadership by choosing to take on responsibility. And that's what leadership is in part. Choosing to follow in a way where she learns. That's leadership too. If we're not great followers, we're not likely to be great leaders. Let's be clear. Choosing to learn on a continuous basis. Leaders who are phenomenal, who've been transformative in their work. What do? They're voracious readers. They're looking at the science. They're looking to understand, and they're open to possibilities. And some of the most remarkable leaders on this planet have been artists, who've also been architects, who've been doctors, who've been lawyers. They've been multiple. And yet at the core of who they are, whether they're extraordinary sports leader or extraordinary educator, at the core of who they are is what we all are, creators. When we are leading, we're creating. And that's why I wanted you on the show today, Briena. So I want to thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. It's very enriching. Glad I got to meet you and glad I got to be here today. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. And as we move forward, I want to again thank Briena. I also want to thank those of you who are looking right now, who are listening, who are taking this in, and those who will see the broadcast on our podcast, who will see it later. As we experience, typically there are hundreds of thousands of people who look at the broadcast afterwards, and we expect that to be the case here. And so when you listen, please listen for understanding. And we all have biases, so you're going to be wired to respond a certain way. Open yourself up. Listen for a deeper level of understanding, and ask yourself, what is it as part of this broadcast you can take away that complements your own leadership? Whether you're a leader of a tech firm, whether you're a leader in a small village, whether you're a leader, fill in the blank. What is it that you can take away that reminds you of your capacity to lead effectively? I want you to think about creation. You're always creating. I want you to think about collaboration. Briena mentioned listening to the folks with whom you work to understand how you might be able to create something, build something. I want you to think about actually investing in youth so that they're prepared to take on the leadership role. We should all be thinking about succession planning on a regular basis. We're not going to be here forever unless we're some very interesting entity. We have a short window of opportunity to be transformative wherever we sit, wherever we stand, wherever we traverse. So I want to thank you in advance for your genius. And in preparation for next show, next Wednesday, Lead Live will be on at noon Pacific Standard Time as usual. And we have another great guest. His name is John Santos. This gentleman will be talking about Afro-Latinidad. Wow. We talk about cross cultures. This man is an award-winning musician, remarkable historian and educator, 7-time Grammy-nominated percussionist, U.S. Artist Fontanelle Fellow, 2013-14 San Francisco Jazz Resident Artistic Director. John Santos is one of the foremost exponents of Afro-Latin music in the world today. This man has performed with Dizzy Gillespie, Tita Puente, Max Roach, Bobby Hutcherson, Chucho Valdez, oh my goodness, the Buena Vista Social Club, John Handy. I can go on. Literally, the number of people who are remarkable across this hemisphere and beyond he's performed with is just breathtaking. So he will be on, and we're going to be talking about another set of compelling discussions related to how this society is functioning and in some areas not leading, undermining the excellence that already exists and thwarting our ability to move forward. And yet at the same time, we'll talk about our capacity to just move through those barriers because that's what leaders do. That's what leaders do. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you.
Yes, thank you.